So, anyways, all right. So, let's get this going. We are on episode 25.
We are.
We are a
I don't
quarter.
know. 24, 25.
I'm going to go with a quarter
Who
century.
can count this high?
Counting the 25 in music would be tough. Either way, you make us do it with your album. Your
That's
little
true.
your jerk. So that jerk is Tim Mirth. This jerk over here is Adam Keeler. And well, you're a jerk for making us count to 25 with your crazy rhythmic stuff on your album there.
Now, the next song I'm gonna write is called "The Jerk." Adam, and it'll be in 25.
It'll be in 25. That'll be awesome.
25 is not the greatest one. Well, 25, that's an interesting time signature because it's sort of just 5, right? But
yeah.
If you did like 5, I don't know. There's some interesting things you could do with that. I think
depends on how you want to count it.
If you phrased it in a way too, where there's only there's 5 measures per system, kind of thing, instead of 4, that'd be kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty
sure. But then it would feel like 120. I don't know. Anyway, I have to think about that.
Yeah, we better watch it. Otherwise, we're gonna start going, and then you do this. And
somebody's gonna call us out and be like, that's really just 7.
Yeah. Or somebody's going to go, like you said, 25-6. And I know 6 isn't generally used as a subdivision, but it does happen. There's some crazy new contemporary stuff where they'll throw 6 in there, and that's just a tuplet feel underneath. So it's pretty cool, honestly. I can't remember. There's a symphonic work. I'll have to look it up, but it's like in 12, or what was it, like 3-6, which everybody's like, huh? But it's because of the breakdown it's like taking that measure and breaking it into 6 even divisions versus
there was a piece I wrote, actually it's on the new album, the Dislocated one. It's like a polyrhythm of like 7/5 or whatever, something like that, but then there's triplets within the 7.
Okay.
So it's like, normally like the 7 sort of feel like eighth notes a little bit, but then there's triplets of those as part of it. So now it's like, now you got to really think like, well, what does that mean? It starts to get complicated. But then once you feel, you have to learn what it feels like, and then you can start playing with it.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that let's go down this rabbit hole, because we've both been working on rhythmical aspects of things for a while. Like lately, it seems to be like the thing that in our practice sessions, and you kind of started me on it a little bit more formally than I normally do.
Going down that rabbit hole. Yeah, let's do
let's do that, because it's something that I've been doing pretty much every day over the last couple of weeks of just playing with staying in the pocket with slower and slower senses of time. And it's been
slower markers of time, right?
Yeah, slower markers of time.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and that's been absolutely fantastic in terms of really reining in and how much you know. And it was embarrassingly bad, like the first time. It was surprising to me how much I was reliant on the click consistent versus, as I started to take away the 4 beats, let's just say out of curiosity, or not out of, for example, instead of having like my metronome set at, let's just say 60 and playing on each beat, keeping 3 of them on, but the 4th beat silent, then 2 of them on, the 3 and 4 silent, then 1 of them on, and that's it. And at 60, that slows it down to, like 15,
right?
Which is crazy unless you're really on top of counting. And it is
So the idea is, a lot of people use the metronome as tick 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 tick, right? So you always have this constant thing that's like reminding you where the time is. So you kind of don't have to pay attention in a way, right? Like you got to try to pay attention and put it in the right spot, but you're not responsible for time then.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea here is like, well, what if it's now you try to do it with half that time, but keep the tempo the same. So if the tempo is 120, right, it's still 120. But now you're only getting a click on 60 or whatever, and then you're only getting click on 30, but the tempo's still 120. So you only get that support every, shorter and shorter time, and then maybe eventually, you're like, when it's 15 or 10 beats, maybe now you're at 120, and 10 beats is every 6 measures or something. You get 1 click,
Yep.
And it's like, well, can you maintain your sense, your sense of time through that whole thing? It's really fascinating, and it makes a lot of sense why that would be important once you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things that And I think to an extent, at least for myself, like using the metronome on every particular beat, regardless of the time signature, like if it's in 4/4, have it going on every downbeat or whatever,
Yeah.
and so on. It became too much of a crutch.
Yeah.
Like I noticed that, like when I started tracking stuff outside of just my normal classical things, it was like, God, if I didn't have that click, I was just not in the groove.
Sure.
And that was granted, you want to play with the click, you want it to all kind of like line up and keep that going. But that pulling back of that veil and taking away that crutch was like, holy cow, I've been letting the click do the work for me.
Sure. And it makes
and
sense.
that,
You think like when you're doing it, you're like, of course I want to use a click.
yeah,
Like
yep.
I want my time to be good and whatever. I want it to be perfect, or those kind of things. But you really, yeah. What did I see? I was telling you about Jeff Berlin. He's like very anti. He's a great bass player, pretty famous bass player. Played with Alan Holdsworth and Scott Henderson and a million other groups. Since we're talking about guitar players, right? So
yeah,
throw two of the greatest guitar players that ever lived and ever will live out there, right?
Yep.
So he played with those guys, and he's very anti metronome, and that's that. He was like saying it's like you're playing with training wheels on all the time.
Yeah.
Like, when are you gonna take the training wheels off?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're actually not. He's arguing you're not really making your time better. Now, he also made, I saw a point through his, like, this is a recent comment, but he's been talking about it for years. So I saw this on Facebook recently. But he's like, of course, because somebody was saying, well, what about in like a studio when people use click tracks? He's like, yeah, of course I'd use a click track. Like, I'm not saying don't use a click track, but not for practice. Like, not when that's not going to help. He's arguing that wouldn't help your sense of time. Whether we agree with that or not, it's sort of interesting to think about. And it's easy when you do this exercise, when you're not putting the click on, click, 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 where you're always getting the constant reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
I remember one of my like early experiences with a guitar teacher, and this wasn't formal, but he was like a family friend. He's like, how I tell a good drummer is after I found out what a metronome was. So it wasn't exactly at the beginning, but a little bit close to it. He's like, I set the metronome down, I turn it on, and then I'll turn it on silent and just see if they can stay with it without looking at it.
Yeah, sure.
And I had no clue what he was talking about in the beginning, but now, and later on, once I was using the metronome, it was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. It's all a matter of being able to consistently work that part of your brain where you're keeping the count,
right,
as it's going. And it's really, I guess it's so remarkable to me how much I was using that. I still was using that as a crutch because it was constant. Like I would always tell my students, my family goes crazy when I'm practicing because all they hear is this click coming from my studio. And I'm not poo-pooing that. Like when I'm doing detail work, that works. But as I get further out, I space that out even more to make sure that I'm staying with it. Right. Eventually, it's like one beat every couple of measures.
But, if you would have asked us this a year ago, by the way, we wouldn't have been talking like this. So this is a relatively recent realization. It reminds me, I remember seeing this in a book, and it didn't dawn on me enough when I read it. And I can't remember which book it was now. But they did a study of people counting, these non-musicians, musicians, and what they found is they're remarkably good at counting time. Non-musicians can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And like they're actually like pretty dead on. Mm-hmm. Like and this is a part of the reason when you hear music and it doesn't fit well in that, is because we actually like sort of just know what that is.
Yeah.
So when I think about that comment now, it's like, well, it's already inherent in us that we'd be able to do that. But in some ways, and I think this was Jeff Berlin would argue too, is that even just by using the metronome, you just told your brain, don't worry about that. We used to be able to do that, but I don't, you're going to have to start doing this a different way. I want you to think about it differently. Instead of saying, just learn how, you just count, because you already know how to do it in a sense. And that's actually one of his comments too, is he's like, it's remarkable to me how many bass players, he's a bass player, can't count. Like not like they won't count for themselves. And I think what he was really implying was when people put metronomes, a lot of times they're not actually counting. They just hear the click and they're playing against it. But if you're like, what beat was that? They'd say, they'd have to think about it maybe and be like, oh, maybe that was 3 or was that 4? I think that was like they stopped actually counting because they were just relying on the metronome. Where you need to be like counting for yourself, like, oh, that was the end of 3 or whatever. Like you should just know that, and like people aren't paying attention. They're like turning that part of their brain off for some reason. And
that's one thing that I noticed with my own practices when I have like, well, just like with that the Koshkin or Koshkin, maybe it's Koshkin. I don't know. Either I'm gonna brutalize it with an American accent and say Koshkin's arrangement of Schindler's List theme. Like there's that section where it gets hugely contrapuntal and it's 16th notes against an eighth note. Melodic content, and like I noticed that if I played with the metronome on every beat, it would stay in time, but it was more like it would kind of knock me into place. Like I would be with it, but the 16th notes weren't divided. But if I would count, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E, and it was like boom, right in the pocket, nice and flowing, and the phrasing really came to life. And I'm not counting it out loud; I'm just saying it in my head, and that's relatively rudimentary subdivisions. Like everybody should be counting 16th notes. So, but the thing is that when I played back recordings of both of those, like one with just the metronome and one with me counting actively in my head, it was like, holy cow, that made a huge difference. Plus, it really calmed down my playing in that section. Because when you're waiting for those quarter notes, you tend to be, oh, this is fast because you're playing 16th notes under a quarter. Sure. Versus when you're counting every little thing, it's like, nope, it's just coming in these divisions and that's it. Even though it is in one sense, it's quote unquote fast, it's not the same perception of time with that. And that was a huge, like, whoa, I need to start doing this with everything now. So even pieces that I've been playing for years, like the EP24, which every single time I try to drop that thing from my concert program, I just can't. I just like it too much. But like, I find myself in the prelude with the 12/8. It's like now I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, well, not L12, L12, not 11, because too many syllables there. It screws up the time. So, but it just, it really was just like, whoa. And it immediately just straightened everything out in a musical way.
Right.
Versus, it didn't get to the point of like a computer-like time, but it really, and that, I mean that computer sense in a negative way. Like to where it's like,
no. That's another problem. I mean, I hear it a lot with, actually a lot of the modern jazz fusion-y kind of guys and girls, and same with like the progressive rock. It's like the time's perfect, but it sounds so stiff. Like it just doesn't sound good.
It doesn't have a groove.
I'm not gonna say any names, but there's certainly a few I'm thinking of that are like astounding guitar players that I'm like, their time feels always so weird to me, and they're not rushing or they're not behind. They just don't have any fluidity in their sound. It sounds like when they're recording, they hear click, 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 and they're just like right in it, and like a machine. But it's like no sense of feel. It doesn't feel human. It doesn't feel like, it doesn't flow. And like that's something I've really been trying to like think about and work on lately. And like I was telling you, like I've been recording myself, and I'll record these little segments like 30 seconds a piece. I know if you go much longer, it's just too hard. So it's like 30 seconds, and then listen, evaluate, adjust, change, 30 seconds. It's brutal. It's really brutal. But you really start to listen to like, you know what's funny? Then eventually you have to start just trying stuff, because like you try to do the thing you think is right for a while, and it just never sounds right. And then you're like, whoa, then I'm going to play super behind the beat, like so far behind that it just feels like funny. And then you do it and you're like, wait, that sounded better. And then you're like, okay. And but then it still doesn't quite sound right. And then you got to like figure out, well, sometimes you got to kind of like be a little bit ahead and a little behind, and you kind of like make this fluid thing. But the way that it depends on the phrase, and like it might start off a little quick and slow down a little bit, but it's all like 16th notes or something, but it kind of has this like stretching thing, and then when you do those kind of things, it actually feels better. Like it's like sort of built into the lines and stuff. And when you listen to the great players, they do those kind of things.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just really interesting. It's not the like overly precise thing. It's like there's a little bit of like playing with the where the beat is, to make it more human. So yeah, this like click every once in a while sort of thing for reinforcement is great. And don't always just like, I'd almost say never have it land on one. It's like have it land on two, and then it only lands on twos. So every other two or something you're hearing. Yeah, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4. So you got to like learn where that is and feel where that is so that it feels right when you're playing.
And I think part of this rabbit hole that we went down in terms of practicing that is just from re-listening to that Pat Metheny masterclass. Because he like ripped that kid apart on the rhythm. But then like, which seemed like, oh my God, dude, just calm down. Leave him some skin. Don't him publicly. But then you hear him do it like as an example, like after he's talking about it, it's like, or maybe not. Never mind. Go ahead and play the kid because
so if you didn't, there's a Pat Metheny like lesson he gives. You can find it on YouTube. It's like 45 minutes, but it's pretty brilliant, and brutal, and enlightening. You know, it's a kid. You've heard people play like this kid who I wonder where he is now. I don't know when this was or whatever. I mean, this thing's been going around for a while. I know I heard it probably 20 years ago or something.
Yeah, it was in the 90s, I think.
Yeah, maybe. So he recorded his lesson and somehow it got shared. But yeah, I mean, he sounds like most good college players or whatever, you know. He's like obviously like knew some harmony and those kind of things. He wasn't awesome, but he wasn't horrible or anything like that. And Pat's just like, man, you got a long way to go. You know? Like you basically seem like you know when the chords change and you sort of like change the key when you're supposed to, but like you're not hitting strong notes and strong beats, and you obviously didn't work this thing out. But it's like that's all important, but your time is just so bad. Like it's like
right. I was constantly harping on that. It's like, oof.
But then he gives examples, like Adam said, and it's really like when you hear it, you're like, God, it sounds good.
Yeah,
it sounds so good when he plays. And it's even like this crappy recording too, but just the feel of it sounds so good.
It was insane. That was the thing that like kind of blew my mind. It's like, okay, Pat's clearly talking this up, and it's like, all right, well, and then he did it. It does it after that, and you're kind of your jaw hits the floor, like, holy shit, that it was like unbelievable. Right. Like he just called it, and he's like, yeah, and then you can do it a little bit behind the big beat and a kind of a swing feel, and it's like he's playing against it like it's nothing, but it sounds like it's so alive.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Like that was just
it's even funny. Like he's like the truth of the matter, man, is like all the good players know this. It doesn't even, and he was making kind of, he wasn't totally meaning this, but he kind of meant it. It was like, if your time's good, like it doesn't even matter what you play. It sounds good. Yep. And then he plays like a chromatic scale. He's like, you just play chromatic or you just play a major scale or something. And he's doing it. And you're like, man, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And it's just him and a click, you know?
Yep. Exactly.
And then you can find videos of Pat. Then if you go after that rabbit hole, find some videos of Pat just like warming up. Those are pretty cool.
Yeah.
They just sound awesome. Like it just sounds awesome. Like anything he plays sound good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that like it kind of reinforces my thing that I always tell my students, even beginner day ones, rhythm is the most important aspect.
Sure.
You got to have time. Sure. And I think to an extent, since, you know, like, and you mentioned this before with like Indian cultures and African cultures and so on, the sense of time that is just ingrained with that.
Yeah.
It's huge. And even Japanese, you know, when I remember watching a video of them making mochi, you know, that the rice dessert but like they're singing a song and the guy's like moving the rice stuff and the other guy's stay at this hammer, like pounding on it as they're going. And it's like, this is the way it was traditionally done for like, you know, X hundreds or even thousands of years.
Yeah.
So if you weren't singing the song right and your time was off, you break your hand, your arm broke by this huge sledgehammer thing.
Yeah.
So you learn pretty quick to stay in time, and that just plays off of it. You know, there's got to be some. There's obviously an evolutionary reason why music and time is such a thing that pulls us in.
Sure.
Like it's got to be there, you know, and
Yeah, so
everything.
that was funny because Jeff Berlin was talking about that. He's like, do you think like Bach and Mozart didn't have a good time? Metronome wasn't invented.
Yeah.
You know, and then you think about, you were just talking about the cultures, like the Indian culture is known for just being like some of the greatest rhythmic thinkers. They're not using metronomes in their study, and they have better time than all the people in the United States with metronomes.
The hand counting. I
Oh yeah, so the conicals, the words, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So guys, you should study conicals. Fascinating, and what you'll find is it's way easier than saying. And I use it all the time, and it really helps, especially like odd time signatures and stuff. It's just getting those words in there because they're better than saying like 1 2 3 1 2, 1 2 3, or 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and you get to 7 and like 7 screws you up, so you don't run into that kind of stuff really. But yeah, like there's different words for it, but they also use this counting thing that's really clever. And I don't know why we don't do this. Is like, say you clap, and you might put this finger down, so that means it's 1. Then you put the two fingers down, 3 fingers down, and you can keep track of time. And they have some different ways that I don't know what the combinations are, but it's like if you were doing this 3 4 1 2, you kind of get that going where your fingers are telling you what beat it's on.
Yep.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. And then you use that with taka 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 dimi taka daragira that kind of thing, and you're still keeping this going, during that whole time. So you can really play with rhythm. It's even just fun, actually, like just like you kind of heard me doing it a second ago. Like if you're sitting there waiting for the subway or the bus or whatever, you're just wasting time.
Yeah,
you kind of sit there, you just play with rhythm and see what you can come up with.
It's like the meme I just saw where it said the original, and it says on it the original drum machine, and then it had a picture of like a high school desk, and it's like, yeah, that's true. Everybody sat there, feet on their high school desk.
Oh, and my daughter today, she was bored because I was talking with friends of mine. We were out, and she was bored, and she's sitting there. She started like trying to drum, like. So she puts like the 1 foot down, and she's like, "Dad, let's check this out." And she was trying to do this really, dun 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 dun, dun like with her left hand, and then like, or something like that. And she's like, "Can you do it?" And then I kind of did what she was talking about, but I'm like, "You should start easier." And I was showing her, I'm like, "Okay, first we're gonna do like the kick, and then this foot, in this hand, and then this will come on the other beat." And so she was getting like the standard rock beat kind of thing. Then I'm like, okay, let's do 2 on that kick, I'm like, but you were just saying that. It's like, that's totally how I learned how to play drums, with on the desk. Do that, I was get independence with all your limbs.
See that apparently I don't have that ability, because I get more than just my hands, and things start to fall apart really, really quick.
Oh yeah, I guess you got more desk time, buddy.
I guess so. I mean, I was too busy walking around or reading.
I just didn't pay attention in class. I was either drawing or doing that, and then that's how you become an engineer and a jazz musician.
There you go. You just subliminally absorb the
other
math,
stuff,
engineering, and then the rest of it is all in your hands. But like last night, I decided to really start to dive into playing or writing drum parts using my drum pad, which it's right there, a little PreSonus Atom there. And that was a lot of fun. Like I got the first times I approached it were terrible, but and I think this rhythmic practice really helped me get a lot more confident in using that, and just kind of like being able to tap it out with a lot more like, okay, this is it type of thing, to the point where I intentionally ditched the click, because this is nothing for public consumption. It was just basically me screwing around to see.
Yeah, you got to mess around with it, right?
You got to get absolute, like, it's one of those things where some people are like, when I die, burn my journals. It's going to be like, when I die, delete the hard drive, get rid of all the stuff that never came to fruition that I thought at 2:00 in the morning was like, that's a great idea. Then it was,
Julie, back up. I'm in here doing Adam a service. I'm deleting the hard drive. Why would you do that? Why do you light that on fire? He told me.
Yep, it needed to happen for everybody's safety on that regard. It's just part of it.
The
But
haunting.
it's like the what was it? That human gnome app.
Oh yeah.
And that's see, like I think that's kind of contrary to what we were going for, and but that's useful in a different way because that's teaching you to follow somebody
Yeah,
versus
that was a totally different, but it's a fascinating one. Like you should be listening to people you're playing with and
yep,
trying to keep up with them. And yeah, they're not gonna be perfect.
exactly.
And you can't just be like, well, you're not perfect, so I guess we're not playing together because I'm perfect.
We're not what's it, George Michael Bluth, with this
Yeah.
incredible sense of time.
Well, I think too. Well, one thing that Jeff didn't highlight, and same with Pat Metheny. Well, he mentioned it in that thing, which is I don't know that you can do it on your own. This is where like the recording's really important because yeah, with the really like every once in a while click thing, you can realize that you didn't know where one was or whatever because the click was you guys didn't line up.
Yeah.
But what you don't have is somebody yelling at you to tell you how bad it was, right? So Pat kind of mentions that like he grew up playing with these guys and they just be like, dude, that sucked. Like you need to get your time together. Like you're not with me. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're always coming too early on the fourth beat. Like you almost need someone to kind of like yell at you about it because you might think it sounds good. That's one thing I realized before doing the recording is like you kind of think like this is where I think I should be playing against the metronome in time. But then when you record it and listen back, you realize, oh, that wasn't like I thought I was doing what I thought I was doing. But when in actuality, what was actually being heard was not the thing that I thought was in my head. So it's almost like you have to relearn how to even hear time and
Yep.
what you're playing against it. So that recording yourself, I think this is why like a lot of people when they go to the studio, they're just like, that's not what I sound like. Yeah. Or like even like we do that with our voices too. You're like, that's not what my voice sounds like. But
Yeah.
I think it's the same way you're playing. You're like, that's not how I sound. And it's like, yeah, actually, that's how you sound. You just never listen to yourself. So you almost like
Exactly.
brutally have to listen to yourself to hear what it sounds like. Because I don't think you can't trust your like instinct on it or whatever.
No, that's exactly it. I mean, the fundamental thing is, and I think that's more of a human nature thing. We'll distort what comes at us. That's just
Yeah,
the way that it is. We only have so much cognitive ability to keep track of everything that it's gonna come through our own rose-colored ears
yeah,
or whatever. But tapes don't lie. I mean, that's one of the first things I
yeah,
tell
right.
someone. Tapes don't lie. You hit play. It's not like the tape screwed up. It's giving you back exactly what you put into it.
Sure.
And I had one student going in the studio, and I'm like trying to prep them as much as possible. I'm telling them, listen, you got to record yourself at home. You
Yeah,
got to record yourself at home before you sit down in that place and do that work. Record yourself at home because if you don't, man, you're gonna get a dose of reality that you don't want to be in public to see. To have that emotional
what I
baggage of
started.
like, oh my god, I suck, and then you realize why some musicians, use drugs in the studio or whatever, because
Yeah, like, I don't want to hear it. Yeah,
jokingly, but it's like, but there is like a tremendous amount of feedback that you're getting at first that is totally, especially the further back you go. Now it's like I can click on my phone and go, there's my feedback, and I
yeah.
got it right. But you go back even 20 years, that wasn't available unless you spent the money for a tape
Sure.
recorder or whatever. And
Well,
so,
tape recorders have been around, right? Those always been convenient. But the phones are great. The phones, I mean, like you
those are
could. I just
fantastic.
delete them. So I like record the 30 seconds and I delete it, and then I
Yeah,
record another
this
30 seconds.
is prosperity or whatever. This is to tell me how much I suck.
Yeah,
To an extent, and I mean that, but that's also part of being a mature musician is to be able to go like, oh god, that was terrible, and not. I can say that, but not feel that emotionally. Just
yeah,
like that's bad. All right, let's do it again. Whatever, and that takes a while, but that only happens through getting some black eyes.
sure.
You got to take your knocks.
Well, and I think if you had the right teachers or the right mentors or whatever,
Yes.
you could get maybe a similar experience. But if you were around them a lot, or
Mhm.
if they were, especially if they're the kind of the old school hardcore, are gonna give you crap for it. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you just need like that tough. I don't know, this, do you actually need it or not? I don't know. We don't have to go into that, but it it's not always the best to have somebody always complimenting you, right?
Oh yeah,
It can be
absolutely.
very useful for somebody to say that really wasn't hitting it, man.
Yeah,
Like,
well, and that's the type of feedback that you appreciate, because when somebody's like,
yeah,
"You're always doing great," then you're not going to really believe them to the extent of somebody that's critical, not hypercritical, but critical in the right way, and be like,
yeah,
"All right, let's fix this. Let's fix this. Work on this. Do this. Do this." And then when they actually you do something and they get complimented, you're going to take it that much more weighted because there was
sure,
actually that discipline to it. And part of that's just finding a good teacher, because you have to
sure,
have that. As a teacher, you have to have the confidence to tell somebody you're wrong.
right,
And then as a student, you have to have the openness to receive that and be like, okay, what do I do to get better? And then you'll take that feedback of positive, like that positive feedback, that much better, because it's like, okay, I'm definitely on the right track now. But if you're
sure,
always getting complimented, you just don't know. And then you walk into somebody else, or you walk into this band setting thinking you're hot stuff, and they just rip you apart. You
sure. Man,
either
it's
can,
good to have.
yeah.
It can be good to have good, tough band leaders that are good. Yeah.
Yeah, what was that movie? God,
Oh, you're talking about
the one
the
with
jazz,
the
the
yeah,
jazzist
yeah,
one.
God, I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, why am I blanking too?
Yeah, I'm blanking because of the Talisker I downed, but uh, I, I can't remember what the heck that called. Either way, that famous drum scene, where it's like,
Yeah.
are you rushing or dragging? Now, if you're really listening, it's like, oh, that kid was dead on like the entire time. This guy is just
Yeah.
trying to break and get inside the kid's head. But at the same time, as a student, depending on the intensity of the teacher, you can take it like that intense that the guys, even though
Sure.
the teacher can be intense, but clearly not throwing the chair intense. But you could take it like he's throwing a chair at you as a student when he's putting you on the spot and pushing you through it. But that's also part of the reason, you have to, I know this for myself. It's like, you got to find those points where you push a student that far,
Sure.
because you can see that the potential is after that, but they got to have that break, or they have to hit that wall within them and hit it hard enough to see the crack in the wall to go like, hey, I can get through this. And then they do, and it's like, okay, great, and they're going to take off, But and that just comes from a lot of experience in teaching. Is like, you have to repertoire with the student. You begin to know them better, know where you can push on things without breaking them, and that's an encouraging
Right.
way. And sometimes, you just got to put the kibosh and be like, that was just terrible. What are you doing? So,
I mean, most of us have had those situations. They're most good musicians, I think, have got reamed a
oh
few
yeah,
times. You're like, even when you think you maybe did okay, and just like you're really, I don't have no idea what you just played. Like, I don't know what you're thinking, or like you're gonna have to, like, that wasn't even, you're so far away from being good that you need to get, like, I don't even know what to tell you. Like, I've had that happen a few times.
Can I see that instrument for a moment?
Yeah.
Just let me see. So, let me get that away from you before you do more damage to that
All
thing.
right.
And we've all done that. It's part of the learning experience. If you haven't gotten your ego thoroughly crushed to an extent, in a healthy learning
Well,
environment,
hopefully in healthy, yeah.
hopefully in a healthy one. And then you have to also, as a student, you got to be stubborn as hell to be like, all right, yeah, I got crushed. I'm going back to this again.
Sure.
Like, and willing to subject yourself to the potential of that happening again, because you're gonna get better.
I mean, this music's not the only field that's like that too,
Oh
right? I
yeah,
mean,
I
like
think
engineering can be
anything.
like that, like law or whatever. Like, you hear all kinds of, people like, I'm gonna quit. Like, I can't take, their boss was really hard on them, or they messed up, and it's like, well, yeah, everybody messes up, but you gotta come back and try to do better.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And the level of mess up is
yeah.
clearly, like, if you did something, it's like, whoop, that just cost the company $70 million. That's a little bit. You're gonna and you should take that hard to an
Yeah.
extent. It's like, well, yeah, that's a huge screw up. Or, if you're like, if I'm playing a wedding and I screw up the bridal march, it's like, right. That's sure. Now, it's been a while, thank God, since I've done that, and
Yeah.
I've set myself up so that where that is going to be extremely difficult to do. I don't grab something that I've never played before 2 days before the wedding and attempt to do it. That's just
Well,
stupid.
also, like, you're probably stuff you've gotten good enough as a musician too, right? Where it's like a little flub's not going to throw you off.
Yeah,
Because we
exactly.
all have, especially on guitar, right? It's a cruel beasts where it just sometimes you actually are playing like pretty much dead on, but you just hit the fret just wrong and it doesn't sound right. No matter how good you are, you can be the greatest in the world, and that happens to everybody. Um, but when you first, when that first starts to happen, and especially when you're performing, you see
Yeah,
a lot of people is like they freak out when that happens and everything falls apart. But the better and more experience you get, it's like that kind of stuff happens, so you just keep going on so that no one else can tell. You knew it happened. Maybe somebody was really paying attention. They heard that note didn't come out quite as good as they thought, but you've saved it already because 3 seconds later everything else sounded good.
or not
No one
even.
even remembers that it happened. Yeah, so you kind of can't just lose. You can't get crushed by those little like I don't even want to say mistakes, just incidents that happen.
Yeah, but that's the other reason why tapes are great, because you can sit there and you can do a concert and you can think that you made this catastrophic mistake where it sounds like to yourself it sounds like you took the guitar,
like clunk.
and just threw it on the stage, jumped on it, peed on it, and walked off. And then when you play it back, it was like a little blip, and it wasn't even that. It was like, oh, and then
was it? I thought it was this. I thought it was this section
that
happened
I'm
in.
sure I screwed that up. Wait a minute, what, really? But then it's the converse is, or the other side, right? Yeah, we'll go with that. The other side is also true, where you think that you're doing great, and then you listen back to it, it's like, oh my god, I was all over the place.
Yeah, right.
It's like, can I actually play something without buzzing a note?
Sure.
And it's great to have that external feedback with the tape, not only with learning, with concerts and so on, because it's a thing that doesn't lie. And it's like, especially now with the phone, if I decide to like throw the phone up and just hit record, the drive home is usually me listening to that performance,
Sure.
And now I'm at a point where it's like, if I think it went really bad, I'm definitely hitting play. Like the better I think it went, the less apt I am to be like, oh yeah, let's play that back. No, it's like now it's like,
you realize how bad it is.
Yeah, exactly. I got to keep that delusion.
Like, I felt good. No, I don't.
I'll get it too. Type of thing.
I was thinking now too, when you were saying that, is when I've been listening back to these little 30-second segments, and I'm really hard on myself. And even like the other day, I was telling you, I'm like, maybe I should just start at the beginning again, like go get like Mel Bay book 1,
Yep.
But I can be really hard on myself. But listening to music and listening, especially on like jazz stuff, right, or anybody really. And if you have good headphones and a good sound, like I can hear my heroes doing that too. Like if I was, like if I put that little critical hat on and some of the things that I hear, it's like I would have never at least in some sense, I would have never let my solo sound the way that theirs did in some of the little flubs that you can kind of hear through it. And it's like, well, but I still love that solo that they did. Right. So it's like there's like two different sides here. It's like the critical side that's evaluating yourself, but you could appreciate it in another musician. So I try to remember that too, like as I'm going through it. It's like, yeah, well, when you're playing with a clean guitar, especially in an amp where every little thing's like amplified, every little like, even like when you rush or you're behind or the time's weird a little bit or something, like, it's hard to find recordings where that doesn't happen with the greatest in the world. So, I guess we all seek some kind of perfection or something, but none of us have it,
Yeah, no, and that's part of the reason why we do what we do. Yeah. If it was easily done, then everybody was doing it.
Yeah, so then you have to go back and be like, okay, well, not every solo that Wes Montgomery did, like, every little note was perfect. In the overall arch of it, yes, they're all perfect in it. It's amazing how great he was. I'm just picking out somebody who's great, who's like known for like every solo just sounds like there's no mistakes in a way. Like he kind of has that vibe, but you can hear a little like thing sometimes where the one note didn't come out as loud as the other one, and then somebody might say, well, he meant to do that, but you can kind of tell, like, if you're really listening, like, well, he probably didn't mean to do that if you're really being picky, but it didn't matter because the vibe was so good and like the notes choice was still perfect or good or
exactly. You begin to take it's like you stop looking so much at every little detail
Yeah.
and begin to pull out a little bit and get a bigger sense of the
Sure.
picture for that. And that kind of goes like, well, that doesn't really matter because these both ends were incredible. So,
Yeah.
whatever.
I
That
don't know
one,
about you, but like some of my favorite music, especially like more in the rock vibe or whatever, or like even like punkish vibe, like it's not perfect like that, but
yeah,
that's like the charm of it. Like it's such
exactly.
a cool vibe, and like, yeah, the strings are like ringing when they weren't supposed to, or like, yeah, there's notes ringing, over each other, and they didn't quite get that chord changed perfectly in time, but it's like there's a vibe to it, and like the overall experience as a listener sounds so good. We like it. I think humans like it too. Like we don't seek this perfection. We like the human artsy quality of it and the sort of rough edges a little bit. I
It's
don't.
part of it.
Yeah, it's a great vibe. I mean, gosh.
And that's it. I mean, fundamentally, you got to have the groove.
Yeah.
That's no matter what style of music you're playing. If it doesn't groove, man, it's lifeless and it's boring as hell. And that means that nothing. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything comes in exactly perfect.
Right.
That gets sterile to an extent.
Yeah, I was
You
just
know,
listening to my friend Ian. He's this awesome drummer. He can do this thing where he actually like puts like stuff on his drums or whatever, and it sounds like almost like electronic drum set. And he sells samples. He's getting pretty like known, or at least in the Instagram and like Facebook worlds or wherever. Like he puts out videos and gets tens of thousands of views and likes and stuff. He's one of those people now. But he was doing an interview about how when he was starting to do this, trying to become sound like a drum machine almost, right? Where you can't tell, like, was that a drum machine or was that a person? Like, you really can't tell in his videos. It's so cool and it's fun to watch and his time's so good. But he was talking about how in the like the sampling world, right, where like hip hop and everything came from, they were taking these old records like James Brown records or whatever and using those, but those aren't perfect. The time isn't like dead on because they're humans doing it without a click or whatever. And so a lot of the samples that were used, like the time isn't exactly perfect. It has this like fluid thing happening, and they're cutting up in pieces and sticking them together, right?
yep.
And it has this vibe, and I'm just thinking now, as I just saw this a couple hours ago. I watched this little thing. If they were perfect, it wouldn't sound as good.
Yeah.
It's part of it is that vibe, right? That they're a little bit off, but it's like the human quality, and it just grooves so much harder.
Yep.
Yeah.
The quintessential thing of the Terminator soundtrack. What time signature is that? And it ends up going like it's like, well, it's kind of like an 11/8, but not really because of the way that the programming worked with a synth that just throws
Right.
it off. So it makes it, but it still works. Like
Sure.
anybody that's seen the movie still has that da na 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 going through their head, whichever. After that, and it's so that's like one of those fascinating human things that we have. It's just like
Right.
we can understand what perfection would be in the sense of no mistakes, but it doesn't mean that we necessarily want that to happen.
Another interesting thought on that same front is like, we like to think, oh, I wrote this thing in 2516, right? And that's really complicated. And I
Buying
did
that
it,
back.
and I perfected it, and I nailed it, and we're right in time. Is that really more complex than like a band playing in 4/4, but they're like slowing down and speeding up? Like just from a complexity standpoint, like the actual like slowing down, speeding up, where they stretch the 4/4. Like
Yeah.
one time it takes 4 seconds, the next time it's 4.2 seconds, the next time it's 3.9 seconds. Like that's actually like a very complex thing to duplicate because it's not so much in time. So does our brain process the stretchy time, so to speak, as more complicated, because it sort of is, than the perfect 25/8 or 16 thing that we think is complicated, but like our brain's like, well, it's so perfect that it's sort of like not that complex in a way. I can easily divide that and do, I can divide those chunks up, and it's just kind of boring. Where this one's actually way more interesting because it's sort of fluid, and I don't really know where it's gonna land, and we actually appreciate it more, maybe as like humans. Maybe that's why we like the slight imperfections more, because they're actually a lot more complex if you were trying to duplicate it. Like as a imagine computer programming, which is why the computer programs never sound that great. They try to humanize it, which helps a little bit actually.
It does. It does.
But it's like to add like sense of like imperfection to it that
Yeah.
actually makes it sound more interesting. It's fascinating, really, when you think about it.
Well, what was I going to say? Shoot, I had something to interject there, but
And I ruined it.
yeah, it's not the first time. But oh God, what was it? It had to do with the Oh, like I was introducing one of my friends to the Cleric, the
Yeah.
band,
Oh yeah.
and like
They're so good at that.
they, they they are, and that's why I'm bringing this up because like I forget what the track name was, but I'm just like this is gonna sound like noise, but let me tell you something.
Yeah.
This is unbelievably difficult to put together consistently, and I remember seeing them with you at with Annabelle's
All right.
in the basement. And it was I listened to the album and then I went and saw the show and I was like, holy crap, they pulled that off live.
Sure.
Like not even like the slightest.
It's so brilliant. Yeah.
It was like, oh my God. It was stunning to me to see that. It was cool on the album,
Right.
but it was that live performance of doing it. It was like, wait, what? Like that was intentional.
They're so good. They're like the perfect like organic band of like virtuosos that
it's
like because they're one of those bands like I don't know. A lot of times when I hear Odd Times or like Dream Theater type stuff, it's like so regimented or something like this part's gonna be in 11/16 and this part's gonna be in 17/16 and maybe they're like this 11/16 to 15/16 to say it's like so like that, but there's always just feels so like organic, like it might be very intense or whatever a lot of times, but yeah, it's like well this part was an 11, but it's not like we contrived it to 11. It's like that just happened, and then this part, well, of course it would be in 17 because it took that phrase and it developed it, and it's like the whole song just kind of evolves. It's like a long form composition that is constantly rearranging itself in this really interesting way. It's very, I don't know, there's really no other bands I can think of quite like that.
Yeah,
especially with the vast amount of like influences that they pull from.
I love their stuff. I still gotta pick up the stuff they did with Zorn.
Matt's stuff with Zorn. That's a cool project. This
Simulacron.
Oh, and then there's the Cleric. They did do one of the albums for the, gosh, why am I blanking on what it is? Masada. So John Zorn wrote the book of Masada tunes, and he had a big project a few years ago where like 10, I think it was like 10 different bands did it, like basically an album of Masada tunes, and Cleric was one of them. Yeah, it's just awesome stuff.
I gotta get my hands on that. That's like obscure to the point of you have to find a place to buy it, and hopefully you can buy it. It's like
you had to buy the whole thing, but there's a few of them you can get as individual albums, I think, and I think the Cleric's one of them.
Either way, I'd grab the whole thing because I like Zorn.
Yeah, it's like $100 or whatever. It gets you like the whole thing, something.
It's not too bad, so and worth it. Like especially if you.
I'm pretty sure that John Zorn got screwed by Pledge Music on that.
That sucks.
I might be mixing up who it was, but I'm almost certain it was Pledge Music. So don't quote me on that. But it was like a Kickstarter or one of those kind of things, and they didn't pay him. And as far as I know, they still haven't paid him.
Wow.
And it was like a good amount of money.
Yeah.
And you didn't get a cent of it. Yeah. They did that to a bunch of bands, I guess. I'm pretty sure it wasn't Kickstarter, but it was like I'm pretty sure it was Pledge Music. Was that the one that is defunct now? They were like, we're bankrupt and we don't have any. I don't know how they wasted. I don't know how they could have done that, but
anyway. Boggles my mind.
Whole other topic, but
yeah, whole other topic. We'll save that for another one. But
yeah, but Zorn's also great with the like fluidity time signature things and stuff. In that I think that's how you say it, Simulacron, which is the guitar player from Cleric, It's Kenny Krokowski on drums, um, John Medeski on organ, and I can't remember. Trevor Dunn from Mr. Bungle and stuff like that plays bass on some of it too. So it's like this killing band. And Zorn doesn't play anything, but he writes all the tunes and they play them, and he produces it and everything. And there's like 7 of those albums out, I think, now.
Wow.
And they're cool. I mean, it's like, imagine like organ with like Matt's playing.
Yeah, that's why is it Simulacrum? Is that it? What you said?
Maybe.
Simulacrum is like a.
It's a word I didn't know.
Magic thing.
It sounds probably right then.
Magic in the sense of like, D&D. You create a simulacrum of the person, and it's kind of like a hologram thing of them.
That seems reasonable. That's probably what it is.
Which seems like it ties to the band name personally, but I could be totally wrong. It's a Samsonite. I was way off.
No, so it's something like that. What you're saying sounds reasonable to me.
Well, we'll throw it into the reasonable category. So,
and it would also explain why I had no idea what it was, because I don't play games.
Yeah, come on, it's D&D, man. It's the hot stuff now, which is kind of true. It's fun to see, like, and my middle school, high school nerddom stuff become like things that everybody's doing now. It's like, I'm cool. When did that happen?
Stranger Things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Probably. I think that had a lot to do with it.
And have your kids watched Stranger Things yet?
Have my kids yet?
Yeah.
No. No. I can't. Like, I watched the first.
Oh, you haven't watched all of them?
Yeah. No, I watched 2. I definitely got through the second season, and that was it. Like, are all 4 out?
I can't remember if it's 3 or 4.
It's definitely 4. I remember seeing a trailer for the 4th season, so I haven't seen the 3rd or the 4th ones just yet.
Okay, yeah, the one that there hasn't been one out for a year or so, or whatever, the last year and a half or whatever.
Well, this last week I started catching up on TV shows because I was just not in the mode to read.
Yeah,
because other stuff, but it was just I'm like I just can't read. I need stupid right now. So I basically I caught up on this whole season's Rick and Morty, which was really freaking good. Holy cow. Wow. There was a couple of moments where I literally had to pause it. I was laughing so hard. Nice. So it's great. But anyways, so before we close up though,
yeah,
we need to hear I have to do this.
You son of a.
Yeah, I got to expose Tim. I pushed Tim Mirth into Apple Music. And what is your verdict, sir?
Yes, I thought it was so. Still, like, streaming's kind of is what it is. But one thing is, I know I hate Spotify. Like, just from the sound, it's always sounded bad. And even when you put on like high quality. So I had Tidal. So part of my Sprint deal that I had for a while is they gave you Tidal for free. So I got to use Tidal initially for free, because, or whatever. And we had Spotify, I think. And we actually went through, like, we had Rhapsody at one point, and we had
Pandora.
So over the years, I don't even remember why we ended up with Spotify. We had Spotify. It's like you just sound quality wise with good headphones. Like, there's just no comparison between Tidal and Spotify. And then you go and look at like artist pay, and Tidal was paying like 3 or 4 times as much per stream as Spotify. So it's like, and it's the same price for like the family plan or whatever. So I was like, I got my whole family to convert to Tidal. So it's like, at least. It's like every time you play a track, at least like 4 times as much money was going to the artist, right? And it sounds better. So it's still not enough, but whatever. Anyway, Apple Music recently did their thing with the lossless audio and the Dolby Atmos thing. And then I think they also made a pact that they were going to pay at least $0.01 per play or something like that, which was a lot, like 3 times as much as they used to pay.
Yeah.
So, and then the lossless and all that stuff, it didn't cost any extra. It just was part of the package.
When they did that for free, I was like, that's kind of impressive, guys. Nice. Yeah.
So then Tidal, though, they did have like a premium package. So it was like double the price, would get you the lossless audio. Anyway, I decided to do the trial because Adam's been bothering me about this Atmos thing.
But You got to try the Atmos. You got to do
So
it.
I tried. So I was like, crap. I'll just get the um. I'll just do a trial or whatever. You get a 14-day trial of Apple Music. And I went to compare it. Well, one, I couldn't get the Atmos to work because my phone didn't support it. But then I had the lossless, so I was going back and forth comparing lossless Apple to the Tidal. It was really interesting, actually. There's definitely a difference in the algorithms, where for whatever reason Tidal sounds a little bit warmer than Apple Music, and Apple Music sounds a little bit brighter. But in terms of like detail, reproduction, whatever, I mean, the lossless was just better than what the Tidal was. You could hear some things you couldn't hear otherwise, and it wasn't the high end weren't so vastly different, but I really noticed it in the low end, like with good headphones and stuff. And then actually, I had to get a phone upgrade, and it's been like months behind doing that. I didn't have to, I guess, but
yeah.
I was kind of due one, and there was a couple of problems with the phone I had at the time anyway. And so I just got a new phone. This has all happened in the last week or so. And it does support Dolby Atmos, so I did get to hear that as well, which I'm kind of like, I'm kind of mixed results with it. But what I did notice though is I had to, because no one has the plugs anymore, the you have to get something for your phone, which sucks. But I got I got a USB-C and it's like some kind of DAC.
Yeah.
But it was like pretty minimal. But anyway, I did notice it, and when I listened on there, even a little bit more so than I had noticed it before. The differences between it. So I think the family will be switching over to Apple.
Yeah. I was absolutely stunned with the lossless thing. And then with the Dolby Atmos, I'm in the same exact thing. When it works, wow, just like, holy crap. But when it doesn't, it completely sucks the life out of a tune. Like,
I just like, I can't decide even when it was done well if I like it better than just the lossless regular. Like,
yeah, I'll give you that.
Sometimes it's like, well, I can hear some things better than I could, but like you lose maybe a sense of power or oomph or something sometimes.
That's exactly.
It's just like, well, is that I can hear more and it's a little bit more separated, and it sounds pretty cool, but maybe it's just not as enjoyable or something. I don't know.
Yeah, losing the power is definitely something that I don't like about it, because it kills the oomph to it. And maybe the question is like, is that because we've always been exposed to the stereo mixes with a certain amount of oomph?
Yeah,
that type of chicken or the egg type of thing. Either way, though, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it's just new tech, and they are literally trying to pump out as much as they can with it.
Well, and then no one is that good at it yet.
Exactly.
Like they're like, oh, I'll put the bass drum over here now. And it's like, well, the cool thing about it before was it kind of hit both ears, and like, it's like, well, now maybe it sort of just feels like it's over here. Whatever reason. Like, so they're like, what they should have probably done is you would have lost a little bit of clarity, but you put it in both again, or what? I don't know.
It's going to take time.
Take a little time to get good at it.
Considering that it's like within the last year that this has happened, and with everything else with the coronavirus and everything, and nobody doing tons of recording and studio stuff, it's going to now we're kind of coming out of that particular aspect, and everybody's going in with these new Atmos orientated ideas. Yeah. So I'm honestly kind of curious to see if Kanye West does it on his next album. And I've never been a huge fan of his stuff before, but I could appreciate everything in the production because it's phenomenal. Sure. So I'm curious to see, like, with this new thing, it's like, is this going to be done for Dolby Atmos, or is it still going to be like the stereo type of thing?
I'm suspecting that the bigger productions will do it.
Yeah, but what I mean is like written for it versus just kind of being like, well, here's the stereo mix, and then we did this other thing afterwards. You know, I'd love to see something with that exact idea in mind, because, like I said, when it hits and it works, wild. When it doesn't, it's like, it's cool, and I can point where stuff is, but it's not moving me it doesn't hit you as hard. and it's I'm beginning like the audiophile rabbit hole is very very tempting. I mean, we were just talking the other day. It's like, why not just screw the middle jump, just go right to the Sennheiser HD
Oh
800S.
yeah, on the
Like,
headphones.
drop the $1,500 on the headphones, and hopefully
Yeah,
you'll
just
be
call
happy.
it a day. Yeah,
So hopefully you'll be happy. You know, there's also those focal, what is it, the clarity
focal
ones?
clear. Yeah.
Yeah, that are like
Uh,
$3,000 or whatever.
oh, maybe those are the clarity ones. I think the clear ones are like 12, 1400 something, whatever.
I think, yeah, either way. But, you know, it's like, it's always a rabbit hole that you can keep
Right.
allegedly.
There's plenty more money to spend if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Sennheiser, the flagship Sennheiser thing outside of the 800s, it's like a $50,000 thing.
Sure.
Like it's set up, but that's everything. It's incredible. It's these super high end headphones with a amp and a DAC and everything like that. Just like you press a button and it literally opened. I watched a video on YouTube because
And then you listen to Spotify.
exactly, and that's the catch. And the guy that like Linus Tech Tips did a thing on like this $60,000 headphone setup with it. And the guy there was using like the Tidal Masters level thing. He's like, you can't do this with Spotify. It'd be like, you know, having Gordon Ramsay make you like a McDonald's hamburger, you know, or whatever. You know, it's like, anyways, that analogy probably falls apart, but you get what I'm saying. So you have to have great sources. And that's like been my big hunt. And I have started to notice like the differences. Like these guys are definitely more on the mids, and the trebles are hugely clear, but the bass needs to be pushed for sure. Like with the hi-fi but once you do, like I have my EQ flat outside of like the lower last, like the 16 and the what is it, 40, and I give it a little bit of it, and it's like boom, it's brilliant. My Odyssey, the iSigns are fantastic with the bass and everything else, but they don't have as big as a stereo space as the over-ears do. And then the Nobles have a pretty good stereo space. The bass is a little bit less kicking than the other ones, but it complements pretty well. You know, but
are any of those open ear? Is
the Odysseys are.
Okay.
The Odysseys are. And these obviously, but the Nobles obviously aren't. You know, you got the same one.
Oh, I didn't realize the hi-fi men's were open ear.
Yep. I don't know if you can see that, but it's great. It's got a great.
I can't hear you.
My kids are always like, "Dad, we can hear your music."
Yeah.
So learn to appreciate it. So
it does help make it sound better in so many ways. If you're in a space where you don't have a lot of noise.
Yep, absolutely. So that's because that outside of catching up on Rick and Morty, that's the other thing that I do is just sat here on the computer and just click through a bunch of Apple Music, listening to different digital masters. But anyways, I think that's a good spot.
Yeah, you got me on the Apple thing. So I'm not so prideful. I would pick audio quality and at least fair. I mean, if they were paying less, I would say screw them. But it sounds like they're at least on the better end of paying artists on the streaming front. It's still everyone's still like a third of the way there, maybe. But
yeah, I think that it definitely needs to come up some, but. You know, I think it's the way that things go with the industry. It's like they're doing one thing, but once the artists begin to realize how much power they have in terms of that, they can pull and get something. I mean, it's $1 trillion company. Come on.
Yeah, sure. And the thing is too, it's like the funny thing about the like pay per stream thing is like that's not how they pay most places. Like they pay record companies like $1 zillion. We can get into this another time, but
yeah,
it's like
let's save that around.
It's like they don't. It's not the only way those artists get paid, but actually, it's the only way the artists get paid, but it's not the only way that record companies get paid.
Exactly.
Or I don't know. And then maybe like Taylor Swift has a deal or whatever. She probably has her own like, oh, I get $10 million for being on Spotify, and I don't get any streaming, you know, whatever. And they just want her on there or something. So they're not playing the same game the rest of us are.
Nope, not at all. All right.
All right, out of here, I guess.
See you all in a week.
Tell us about your if you tried the metronome thing. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, let us know what you think of that, and also what streaming services are you using? And let's open it up to headphones as well. Like, what's the common thing? If you want, you know, leave a comment just so we know where people are at and what they're doing. So
yeah, that'd be cool to know.
Yep.
All right. Later, y'all.